Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Naomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. Today, I'm joined by Duncan Bhaskaran Brown, and he is the CEO of Alc Aware. So he spends his time helping people push those overindulgence or overindulgence out of their life. So welcome, Duncan. Thank you for joining me.
That's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to having a chat. Always love an octopus.
I always love a chat and an octopus, so it kind of goes together well, doesn't it?
Yeah. We're going to have some fun.
Yeah. So for the listeners, can you give a bit more of information about yourself, bit of an introduction?
Yeah, so my name's Duncan. I'm a speaker, an author, and a Morris dancer. I live in Oxford, in the United Kingdom. I like falling off my inline skates. I've got a beautiful wife and a slightly cheeky child, a couple of bonsai trees. And, what I spend my day doing these days is not helping people to stop drinking. It's more helping them to start living. And I
Yeah.
do that one-to-one, which is enormously rewarding. But more of our work these days is about going into companies and providing them with programs that give their employees a bit of alcohol awareness. Because what we've found is that the majority of the harm done by alcohol is not actually at the edges. It's not those kind of people that have a big problem, the kind of people that tend to come and see me one-to-one. It's
Yeah.
the people in the middle.
Yep.
They're not drinking as much, so they're not doing themselves as much harm, but they are doing themselves some harm. And just because there's so many of them, that's where most of the harm actually resides.
Yeah, and it's interesting in the Western cultures more so, there is a heavy focus on alcohol being this social connector. And if I could just start off with a story, I had in one of the companies I was working with, there was a fatality in a FIFO situation. So, I flew up there and it was a Filipino man that was involved. So we went to the camp and we saw all of the employees and, they were drinking and celebrating his life, that sort of thing. And then we went to the family home, which were all Filipinos, and they were all just sitting in silence, right, in remembrance. And it was a real strong contrast on how each of those cultures dealt with that same situation.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a very, very interesting point. We tend to think of alcohol as something that's very universal, but if you actually look at the statistics, not so much. So if you look
Mm.
at that swathe of the world that goes from Pakistan all the way across North Africa, the amount of people that don't drink in that area rarely drops below 95%. Obviously, it's an area dominated by Islam, and Islam is not that keen on alcohol.
Yeah.
So there's that huge part of the world where pretty much no one drinks. And
Yeah.
then in Asia, you've got places like India. About 65% of people in India don't drink. Again, for religious reasons. Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, not that mad keen on alcohol either.
Yep.
But also, it's not part of the culture. And then as you go further east through Asia, what you find is more and more people have this genetic issue with alcohol. So, it's quite complex, and I'm not a biochemist or anything like that. But, what they do, they lack an enzyme that works in the process of breaking alcohol down. And they get typically this flush response. So they drink a small quantity of alcohol, they go very red, their heartbeat gets fast, they get headaches, they get nausea. It's basically what happens to most people when they drink alcohol. It just happens a lot quicker with them. So that affects about 30 to 50% of East Asians, depending on where you go in the world.
Yep.
So again, you even in cultures like China, where there is actually quite a big drinking culture, the world's most sold spirit is banju, I think they call it, which is a Chinese spirit. But
Okay.
even in China, 45% of people don't drink at all ever.
Mm, mm. And look, if I go back to my early days, I was a very heavy drinker, and I'm talking, every night, getting to the point where you would say I would definitely wasn't legally able to drive, right? So that was consistent for me. And then I had my daughter. So while I was pregnant, I stopped drinking. And then I had a big night after, I had her, and I was just so, my body was just had such a reaction to it that I was just like, I don't think this is for me anymore. And, I might have a couple of glasses of wine if I'm at a social event, because again, being social. But other than that, I really don't drink, and I don't miss it either.
No, no. You know what? I've worked with a lot of people. I've interviewed a lot of people. I know a lot of people that don't drink. I've never met any of them who tell me they regret stopping drinking.
Mm.
I meet a lot of people who regret attempting to moderate their drinking. So instead of stopping, they try and limit it to one or two drinks on, and then we all come up with these elaborate rules, don't we? I've met a
Yep.
lot of people for whom that becomes painful and miserable, but stopping drinking, no, I think most people really, really enjoy it. And I think there's a very interesting point in what you say, not universally, but a lot of people, for them, that reduction or that out and out quitting of alcohol is very much tied up with having a family. It certainly was for me. It certainly was for a lot of the people that I've worked with.
Yeah, yeah. And I did find, like, I used to have this mantra, and I go, I feel sorry for people who don't drink, because when they wake up, that's the best they're going to feel all day, right? However, when I wake up now not drinking, I feel better than my best day when I was drinking. But you don't know what you don't know, right?
Of course, and the irony of that is that you should feel at your best when you wake up. I mean, that's
I know,
like
right?
that's what sleep's for, dude. It's meant to make you feel better. And
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mornings, yeah, it was a revelation to me. I if you'd asked me, I'd have said, "Oh yeah, well, of course I'm a bit sluggish in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I know all about the chronotypes. And I am definitely not the early bird." And honestly, for 20 years, that was my mantra. That was my belief. And then when I stopped drinking, I started jumping out of bed. And I got up quite early this morning because, our time differences are quite large. So your
Yes.
afternoon, my morning. I got
Yes.
up quite early. I jumped out of bed. I did my exercises. I had fun. I wasn't like just feeling sluggish and terrible and tired. And, you know, that's the greatest gift I've ever got.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we're talking, businesses and leadership, it can be a bit tricky. I mean, in Australia, especially in the resources sector, we have big drug and alcohol testing and those sorts of things, but they test for you being actually under the influence of alcohol. They don't test for your sluggishness and your reaction systems and your lack of cognition in a hangover. Right. So we're turning up to work, and it can be quite problematic for businesses, can't it?
Yeah, I think so. And look, I mean, there are some industries where the consumption whilst you're working is a big issue. Anything where you're driving,
Yeah.
anything where you're operating heavy machinery, then the primary reason to steer your alcohol policy towards people not drinking is obviously to protect them and to protect other people. And I absolutely get that. But I think if we focus too much on that, we miss the deeper point about how turning up to work with a hangover makes you less efficient. People typically rate themselves as something like 35% less efficient when they've been drinking the night before,
Mm.
which they probably underestimate. And I mean, I don't know what the statistics are like in Australia. I imagine they're rather similar percentage wise to the UK. But in the UK, about 500,000 people turn up to work every day with a hangover. That is an
Mm.
awful lot of lost productivity. And that is probably why it cost the British economy £53 billion last year. That's simply in terms of lost productivity. And I love that statistic because 53 billion is actually the exact amount of money that the UK government got in corporation tax. And I think that signifies something to us that alcohol is a tax on business.
Yeah. Oh, I like that framing. That's really good. I like to think of myself as a reframing specialist, and I love that framing around making us think differently. But you mentioned before about the difference between drinking at extremes and not drinking at extremes. So, why is the harm from drinking not found at those extremes?
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not advising anybody to drink really, really heavily. You will stuff up your life. I've met a lot of people. Yeah, I tend to work with people who get onto the brink rather than actually all the way over the other side. But I can give you plenty of examples of people who've drunk themselves out of a job, out of a family, out of a home, out of a
Yep.
driving license.
Yep.
So, there's a lot of harm going on there, but that is a relatively small portion of the population. These sort of very severe drinkers that, you're probably talking about 5 to 10%, depending on where you are. What the area that we really want to get to are the people that are drinking at a severe risk level. And most of them would probably tell you that they're drinking in moderation. Most of
Yeah.
them would probably tell you they don't have a problem with drinking. And certainly they wouldn't be what we typically expect an alcoholic to be. They're holding down jobs, they've in relationships, they're doing life. They're just drinking 2 or 3 drinks every day, or they're drinking very heavily on the weekend. But that is enough to do some quite significant harms
Mm,
to your body. So you're going to mess up all of your neurotransmitters in your brain, all of the ones that are responsible for making you feel peaceful and calm and relaxed. You're going to get a bit of a spike from that when you start drinking, but the net result is when you wake up in the morning, they're going to be a lot lower. So you're going to
yep.
wake up in the morning feeling a bit vulnerable, feeling a bit anxious, feeling a bit like you don't really enjoy life. Then there's the effect that alcohol has on your sleep. Just 2 drinks is enough to ruin the quality of your sleep by about 24%. And that's the important bit of your sleep. That's the deep REM sleep. That's the bit where your body repairs itself, where you reprocess information and emotions and things like that. And so you're really damaging your sleep. You're getting into your HPA axis,
Yep.
cortisol. I'm sure most of your listeners have heard of the stress hormone cortisol. 2 drinks is enough to raise your cortisol level by 18%. So if you're doing that every day, you are taking a huge toll on your body.
Mm,
Most people will turn around to you and go, oh, no, it doesn't affect me though. And that's because we're not very good at noticing things that happen to us gradually.
mm,
If I had gone from being 15 to the way I felt at 35 overnight after 20 years of hard drinking, I would have phoned a doctor.
yeah.
I'd have been like, oh my God, there's something seriously wrong with me. I better get medical attention. But because it happened daily, because that deterioration went on and on and on over time, you don't kind of notice it. It's like this baseline fallacy. You don't see the baseline shifting slowly over time. So
Mm,
most people will tell you that it doesn't affect me, but it does. It is like seriously affecting their ability to perform, their ability to, you know, get the most out of relationships, to process emotions, to enjoy life. And that's the big harm that's happening in our society, and it's happening to a lot of people. So
mm,
somewhere like 40% of Australians are going to be binge drinking regularly. That's what, at least once a month they're drinking way more than they should be. And sadly, the problem with alcohol is that most of the harms come after you get intoxicated, which
yep.
is ironic because it is an intoxicant, and that is kind of almost the purpose of it. So if you use it as it's meant to be used, that is when it's going to start hurting you. And that's the kind of massive amount of harm, that massive group of people that we want to get to and actually do something to. And that's why we try to get at them through where they work, because it does have a huge impact on productivity, on morale, on talent retention, on diversity, on a load of stuff businesses are seriously interested in.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't know what we don't know either, right? So, I've also, if we go, past our working lives and into when we want to retire and enjoy life. Now, I've got a friend whose dad's actually been put in a home with dementia, and it's alcohol related dementia. And so he now obviously doesn't drink because the nursing home doesn't allow it, and he's living a great life, but he's living it without memories, which is really sad to see.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, dementia is obviously quite a complex subject, and I am not an expert on that, but I do know something, and I do know that a lot of dementia is vascular. That's why we see a lot of a rise in vascular dementia, and that's your circulatory system. And there are a couple of things that really damage your circulatory system. Smoking is not good for you. Eating a bad diet is not good for your circulatory system either. But alcohol is the one that most people don't realize. They don't
Mm.
realize that it has an effect. That's why, it's correlated with heart disease, it's correlated with strokes, it's correlated with dementia. And guys, if you're listening, erectile dysfunction.
That'll get some responses, I'm sure. So
Yeah, that's what I like to point out to people. This is damaging stuff you care about. And it's
yeah,
not damaging it in 20 years' time, it's damaging it now.
yeah. So we if you're looking at, those sorts of things, I'm sure there's ways that we can, get checked or get assessed for this sort of thing. Which group would the World Health Organization recommend for checking this annually, with the alcohol use?
So there are quite a few groups, and some of them, I think people wouldn't be too surprised about. So if you were away from home for a long period of time, if you're sort of doing something like you're in the Merchant Navy, then that is very correlated with heavy alcohol use. And that's not surprising because you're away from all of your social support systems, all of those kind of things like that. We can we can see how people who are in very confined situations, the armed forces is another one. And
Mm.
I'm sure none of your listeners will be going, my gosh, soldiers and sailors drink a lot. I did not know that, Duncan. So, there's some areas where it is kind of more obvious. The
Mm.
one that I think is most interesting is actually a panel of experts convened by the World Health Organization recommended that business executives should be screened for alcohol use annually. And a
Mm.
lot of people kind of scratch their head and go, why is that? These are people who are, they're rich. They've got good access to healthcare. They've got probably better diets than average. They've got a lot of meaning. They've got social support. They've got all of these wonderful things in their life. Surely they're going to be healthy. Well,
Mm.
yeah, those things help. But what those things actually do is they mask the fact that they're drinking a lot and that that alcohol consumption is causing problems. So about 13.5% of high earners, that's the highest bracket of earners in the UK, drink every day. And there is no way to drink every day and not have a problem with drinking. And
Yeah.
I imagine the statistics are going to be the same in Australia, but it is literally a straight line graph of
Mm.
earnings to drinking. The more you earn, the more you drink. The more you earn, the more you drink. And alcohol is a problem of success, which is kind of the exact opposite to what we think. We think that the problems with alcohol, they're people who live on the streets drinking, cheap wine out of a paper bag. But the reality is that a lot of the serious harms happen to high earners. So high earners with college degrees, it's about 50-50 as to whether they drank last night. So
Yeah.
it's a big impact. And I think that the idea of screening people annually is something that we really need to move forward. Now, a lot of people who work in the medical business would absolutely love to do that, but I don't
Mm.
know about Australia, but I imagine it's probably the same. If you get 7 minutes with your doctor, you're in luck.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
done quite well. And you're there to discuss a particular problem, and that's what they're going to focus on. And they're going to focus on treating what's in front of them. They aren't going to talk about what caused that. You go in and you've got some angina or something like that. They're going to try and treat the angina. They're
Mm.
not going to point out to you that the lifestyle changes, like stopping drinking or drastically cutting back your drinking, has the potential to actually really mitigate those symptoms. And if you look at the work of people like Claude Esselstyn, he's actually reversed heart disease. He's done some amazing work with people, and it's all down to lifestyle changes. It's
Hmm.
not big medical interventions. It's not drugs. It's broccoli and not alcohol.
Yeah, yeah. And just looking after our bodies, right? Like I know, I mean, it's getting better and there are some good doctors out there, so I don't want to slam the Western medicine. And the Western medicine saved me as well with a few circumstances. So I'm a big fan. But I also noticed that there's many doctors out there when you do go in for an ailment of some kind, they're not asking you what's your diet like, what's your sleep like, how much exercise have you had. You're right. They're just like, here's a prescription. And I think we've been conditioned to expect that. We don't want them to pry into our lives. We just want the script and the pill, and then off we go. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's entirely understandable. I mean, human beings, we basically, there are only three things that we're really interested in: getting a bit of pleasure, getting away from pain, and doing it with the least possible effort. So if we've got pain in our life, if we've got a medical problem that's causing us pain, then we want to get away from that with the least possible effort. What's the least possible effort? Taking a pill.
yeah,
Like, I mean, you do have to remember to take it, but it's pretty low maintenance as an intervention, isn't it?
yeah,
And that's what we want to hear. It's not because we're stupid. That's just because how we are as a species. What you've got to realize is that actually sometimes you do have to put in the effort to get to the pleasure and to get away from the pain. And, you know, I, I think I meet a lot of people and they feel like there's no other way. They feel trapped. They just think, well, obviously I've got to drink, Duncan. I can't make my life work without alcohol. I can't socialize. I can't handle stress. I can't be myself. I would just be boring without alcohol.
mm,
And I have yet to meet somebody who's stopped drinking who's found all of that stuff true.
mm,
What I find is that as soon as people stop drinking, they realize that alcohol was one of the primary causes of their stress. And as they go along their journey, they learn new and better ways of coping with stress, whether that's walking in nature, spending time with friends, having a bubble bath, meditation, yoga, journaling. I'm legally obliged to meditate to mention meditation, yoga, and journaling, by the way.
yes, yeah,
And they find that actually socializing is better without alcohol. It's different, but it is better because ultimately, what's the best night out? The one you can remember or the one you can't?
yeah. And the one you wake up feeling good from, or the one you wake up feeling sluggish from, and all of those, what did I do? What did I say? Oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done this.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Naomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Naomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgoconsulting.com.au.
Yeah. I mean, that's like we've all been there, haven't we? That waking up, trying to piece together last night, the regret, the shame,
Yeah.
and like I honestly love talking to people and unpacking that and helping them to see that because they walk through the door and they tell me that they enjoy drinking, and it's like, okay, let's examine that as a concept. Do you really enjoy drinking? Do you really enjoy that shame and that regret and that pain in the morning, or is that actually part of what drives you to drink?
Mm,
Because you wake up feeling bad, you go into work and work starts badly, and then you have a stressful day, and then things break, and your boss is an idiot, and you come home and you're just wound up and stressed, and what can you do? Well, you just have another drink, don't you?
mm, mm. So, when you're working with businesses and companies, how do you help the leadership team in, processing the people within the group that are drinking? And because I know one thing about humans with the work I do, you tell them not to do something, they're doing it, right? So, how do you get those messages across in different ways?
Yeah, so we don't actually tell people to stop drinking.
No.
I mean, I'm kind of honest with people. I think if you look at these three groups of people that I've already talked about, you've got your very severe drinkers. They probably need to stop. You've
Mm,
got your severe drinkers. They at the very least need to stop for a bit and then get a solid plan about moderation. And then you've got your kind of moderate risk drinkers who are drinking a bit below the government guideline or a bit above the government guidelines.
mm,
What they need to do is probably just dial it back a little bit,
mm,
and that's the message that we want to get across to people. If you think that you can enjoy drinking and you can do it without it causing you a load of problems, that's great. That's what I want to help you to do. I want to help you to enjoy drinking more, because if you enjoy it more, you'll actually do it less, which I know it sounds weird, but it is true. So much of the drinking that we do is just automatic and without really thinking about it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Friday, better have a drink. And like, I know my parents, they're just like that. They never really think about it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, therefore I must have a drink, and occasionally on Wednesday, and every day if they're on a cruise. But they don't have a problem or anything. But it's automatic. They don't even think about it. And if you're not thinking about something, you're not mindful of it, you're not aware of it, you're not enjoying it. So what we try and do is help people to become more aware of their drinking, to make it more of a special thing, to get it back to what it really should be. Drink when the occasion actually suggests that it's worth drinking, not just because it's Friday and you're watching Netflix. And then, put a bit of novelty into your drinking. Don't always drink the same thing. The vast majority of people will have not just a drink, they'll have a brand, and they will drink nothing else. So why not just have a bit of novelty? Look at the menu, see what's on there, try a cocktail, try a craft beer, try some cider, whatever. But, actually think it through and then taste it and enjoy it, and bring some presence to the experience. And that way you can enjoy it more. And that's the kind of message we want to get across to people. We're not trying to tell you to be like me. I mean, no,
Who wouldn't want
like,
to be?
really, don't try and be like me. I have yet to master it myself. For some people, sobriety is the right thing to do, and of course we'll support you with that. But for some people, finding a better balance with alcohol is the right thing to do, and we want to support you with that, because if we can reduce the harm and increase the enjoyment, everybody's a winner, aren't they?
Yeah, and it can become more of like a sacred kind of special thing, can't it? And like you said, I love that. Like, savor it, enjoy it, process it, be in the moment with it instead of using it as a mask. Use it as an enhancer. Really, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to use the analogy of birthday cake. So if you really think about it, there's you and your family and a few close friends. So how many birthdays that are actually significant to you happen every year? A dozen, 15,
Yeah.
maybe. So you should be eating birthday cake about once a month. And that's what used to happen.
Yeah.
We would only have special occasions on special occasions. We would have that blowout at Christmas and it would feel different because we weren't doing it every day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now you can go and buy birthday cake ice cream, and you
Mm.
can eat birthday cake ice cream whenever you want to. And it's like, literally, we eat birthday cake every day, and
Yeah.
it's no longer special anymore. And
Mm.
that's what, I think we need to do, is reclaim the fact that it's something different, something unusual, something special.
Mm.
And that makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more valuable.
Yeah. So I have three questions that I ask all of my guests when they come in, because although this is a leadership-based podcast and it's about helping people, become the best leaders they can be, I also feel like there's a bit of inner work that happens with that. So my questions kind of sit around that. First one is, what's the biggest obstacle you've ever had to overcome, and how did that strengthen that connection inward?
So all of the obstacles that I've ever overcome have been entirely inward. They have all been examples of me getting in my own way. I mean,
Yeah.
I think your listeners have probably got by now that alcohol was a bit of a problem for me, and it was an example of me getting in my own way. And it
Yeah.
was an example of my self-limiting beliefs. I believed that my life wouldn't function without alcohol, and caused me an awful lot of problems. But, on my business journey, there have been a lot of other beliefs that I've had to strip back. I mean, particularly beliefs around money. So I
Yeah.
used to sort of believe that, you shouldn't pay too much attention to money. You should kind of throw it around and like not really care about it. And that's the generous, warm-hearted thing to do. But, I did the work and I realized that that's actually just my reaction to my mum being very careful with money, which when I was a kid, I perceived as meanness. It's not
Yeah.
meanness. It's just being careful with money, because money is quite a useful resource, and one
Yeah.
should not be profligate with it. So once I'd done that, it really changed my attitude towards money in general, but particularly in terms of business and actually paying attention to the
Yeah.
finances, which are quite important as a business kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, like, honestly, all of your obstacles are internal.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. And I also have this belief that, when we are experiencing challenges at the time, it can be heavy and it can be yuck and unfamiliar, but there usually comes a time where if we look back, we've got some gratitude. So do you have, a main challenge that you've experienced that at the time was not so great, but now you've got some gratitude for?
Yeah. I mean, I I think of one particular relationship that I hated at the time. I hated working with this particular individual. I thought she just did not like me.
Yeah.
Turns out she does not like people,
Yeah. Okay.
and a lot of people reported this, and you generally quite a pain. And when I left that organization, yeah, it's one of those things when people say, "Do you miss it?" I always sort of tend to say, "Well, no, not really. I don't miss the rubbish. I miss the people. Of
Mm.
course, you miss the people, don't you? Not her. Didn't miss her. Didn't miss her at all. So pleased to get away from her." And it was very hard working with her. But I think what I learned from that was that if it's hard working with you, it must be even harder being you. And that
Mm.
you know that that taught me so much about life, that most of the things that people say to you, they're really actually saying to themselves.
Mm.
Their relationship with you is a reflection of their relationship with themselves.
Mm.
And that is one of the reasons why you should not hate people when they are awful to you, because they're not really being awful to you, they're being awful to themselves.
Yeah, it's like that analogy or that little parable story about, the guy that's gone to grab the snake out of the fire and it's bitten him and he dropped it into, and then he's still got a stick to get it out. And someone's like, the snake just bit you. Why are you helping it? And he's like, well, it's in the snake's nature to bite, but that doesn't stop me and my nature of wanting to help and still care for it.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely the point. Most people don't realize you can choose your reaction to life. You can choose whether to be the snake or the guy with the stick.
Yeah.
And I know what is a lot more enjoyable when you wake up in the morning. I know
Yeah.
what is a lot more enjoyable when you're trying to get to sleep at night. It's being the guy with the stick. It's being the person that gives rather than the one that takes.
Yeah. Totally agree. And so finally, my last question for you is, and we're talking about that inner self before and how I feel like the people that are more comfortable with who they are internally end up being able to present in a stronger way and come from, a stronger place of service, triggered less, all those sorts of things. So do you have any daily, weekly or monthly practices you do that strengthen that connection with inner self? I heard you mention a couple of them before, so I assume you're going to bring those ones up, maybe?
Yeah, well, so I'm hardly going to dodge the question unless, of course, I remember halfway through my rant. I think, do you know? I think that is so true. I spend a lot of time with speakers. Partly because I'm trying to learn from them. And the
Yeah.
irony, of course, is that you learn from the best. Absolutely. I mean, I
Yes.
say learn, steal from the best.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I also learn from the people who aren't any good. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I've learned from the people that aren't any good is that they are often not comfortable with themselves. So when
Mm.
they get up on stage, that discomfort with themselves just gets magnified.
Hmm.
And it's something that we talk a lot about in the speaking community. We've got to, get better at platform mechanics and stagecraft. We've got to get better at vocal variety and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, do you know what? If you want to be a better speaker, probably just getting more comfortable with yourself
Yeah.
will do more for you than you possibly can. So, what do I do to reconnect with myself? I mean, I think I'm too cheap to have a therapist. I'm not spending money on that kind of stuff. So I write books,
Yeah.
and for me, that is my free therapy. I constantly seek to expand my knowledge, and part of that is, of course, research. Part of that is, of course, interviewing other people, reading books, all of that kind of stuff. But
Mm.
part of it is actually trying to phrase it in my own voice, and that is it. it takes an awful lot of work to write like yourself,
Mm,
and that is a process that I've gone through over the last sort of 5, 6 years in my writing journey, and that's been enormously helpful. I have written quite a lot about my past as well, which has helped me to kind of really delve deep into it and understand it. But
yep.
all of those kind of things, writing is particularly important. I mean, it always sounds a bit bad when it's kind of like one coach to another, but a coach.
Yes.
Like I have a coach, I have a mentor, I have accountability
Yeah.
partners, I've got a mastermind group. I spend an awful lot of time getting my ideas kicked around by people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is enormously helpful. Don't try and do it on your own. I tried to do it on my own for 20 years, and that just led to alcohol-induced misery. So
And well,
yeah,
that's you.
definitely
Sorry, I
do
was
a
going
bit
to
of
say,
writing and get some help.
yeah, and that's your unofficial therapist, right? Your coach and your mastermind and all of that. Like that's,
Yeah, as I was saying that, I realized that
yeah. Well,
my
only
my
because
statement didn't quite add up, but yeah.
but that's okay. Because I'm obviously I do one-to-one therapies with people and have the same, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm not really into therapy, and I'm thinking, well, I'm sure you've got a best friend that you download to, and I'm sure you got this that you do, and so everyone has, whether it's official or unofficial, we all have those ways to find therapy in and really to me, therapy is just finding someone you can release to that can have an objective point of view that can help reframe where you're at that point in time, right? Or give you different
Yeah,
ways to look at it.
I mean, I don't want to scare any of the men listening to it, but I think the idea of releasing emotions actually, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but I think sport can be quite therapeutic.
Yes.
I think that's one of the reasons why we like doing it, because it's kind of a
Yep.
safe way for us to release our emotions. So,
Yep.
if you're a bit more conscious about that, then that kind of like physical based therapy can be enormously important.
Mm,
Like I say, I'm legally obliged to talk about yoga at least every 15 minutes. And I do love yoga, and it
yep.
has helped me reconnect with my body. But I realized that I get a lot of the same benefits that I get from yoga from skating, because I happen to like skating. But
Yep.
if it's footy or cricket, it can be therapeutic. You can release those emotions in a safe
Yeah.
space, and I think that's something that the men out there should sort of not really listen to, but also listen to.
Well, if I go a little bit esoteric in that speaking, our body's full of different meridians and centers, and that's how, acupuncture works, all of that, just trying to bring it back into normalize so it's not too woohoo what I'm about to say. But, those energy centers we have when we're physically active, they get active. And so they're shedding all of this yucky stuff. And that's one of the reasons why physical exercise makes us feel so good, right? Because it's clearing out our physical body and our energetic body at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I obviously, when you're skating, balance is quite important. It's quite painful if you get the balance bit wrong, but I do genuinely feel more balanced when I
Yeah.
finish skating.
Mm, yeah, no, most definitely. So, look, you mentioned books before. I can see some possibly strategically placed behind you. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about those before we finish up?
Yeah, so my latest book is called Real Men Quit, and I wrote that because there are a lot of amazing women out there doing a lot of amazing work in the sober space. But the guys, we are lagging behind. It's a bit shocking. I know normally the blokes are all over the place. We're normally crowding everything out and taking the spotlight.
Yeah.
But the one area where we really are lagging behind is in sobriety. So it depends who you talk to, but blokes are basically 2 to 3 times more likely to have a problem with alcohol and about 5 times less likely to actually get any help with it. I mean, that's a
Mm,
huge surprise. Blokes don't want to ask for help. And that's why I wrote Real Men Quit to offer them a little bit of help if they need it. And it is very much designed around men. So there's a bit of James Bond, there's quite a lot of sport, there's Star Wars, the Terminator, and there are a metric ton of really bad jokes. They're really,
nice.
really, really bad blokey jokes. So that's if you want to kind of get an idea about where your drinking's at and rebalance that relationship a little bit. That's that one. Before that, I wrote a book called Get Over Indulgence, which is kind of my journey. It's kind of like a self-help novella. It's a
Yeah.
very pretentious
Nice.
way of putting it, isn't it? But it's about what happened to me going from junk food, alcohol, cigarettes, to actually enjoying life and being happy and all of that sort of stuff. And there's I try to kind of sneak in a little bit of a message and a little bit of practical wisdom in there, but mostly it's just jokes again.
Yeah.
Mostly it's just a nice, pretty story. And if your listeners wanted to grab a copy of that, just put getover.uk into the internet and they can download a free copy, Kindle, PDF, or if you can stand to listen to me for 3 hours and 45 minutes. Sorry about the silly voices. You can have the audio version as well. That's at getover.uk. Real Men Quit is on Amazon. It is on amazon.au, I assume it will be. It's on
Yes, yes.
.com.jp.uk,
All
all
that
of
sort
them
of
stuff.
stuff for anyone listening. And we do, the last check, I think it was about 15 countries people are downloading from. So although I tend to talk about Australia a bit, it's great to have guests from all over the world because we've got listeners from all over the world. So it tends to connect. But I've got some links from you already, I believe. So I will definitely pop those in the show notes as well. So to make it easier, if people, we like that shortcut, don't we? We like the path of least resistance. So they can just scroll down into the show notes and click on the links if they're interested in learning more about you or your books.
Yeah, more pleasure, less effort. That's what we want.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for jumping on today. It's really great to chat with you, Duncan. And I feel like there's some really great content here for some people, especially those that are kind of going, something's not right, but I don't know what it is. Maybe this gives them some insights to make some changes.
Yeah, look, I mean, before you buy a giant water bottle, take up yoga, or get some blackout blinds, I'd look at your drinking first, because it will have more of an impact on your well-being than pretty much anything else.
Yeah. And if you're really stuck, now I'm going to do a self plug. I can work and help people that are really in that stuck space if it's really subconscious deep. So there's lots of help out there, right? When no one's alone.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I mean, if you are starting to wonder that you've got a problem, you can come and see me if you want. Come and see you. But I don't really care what you do so long as you do something. There are an awful lot
Yeah, I
of
love
great
that.
people out there in the world. And that's one of the nicest thing about the sober world, is that there are a lot of people and they genuinely want to help you because they've been there. They
Mm.
know how horrible it is. They know how great coming out the other side is. And we all want to share that. And whether you go through a group program like AA or Smart Recovery, whether you work with a therapist, whether you work with a coach, or whether you just use what my friend RJ refers to as the stubborn method, where you just stop and do it on your own and maybe spend a bit of time on the internet, read the odd book, listen to the odd podcast. There are people out there that want to help you.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I love how you said that because that's indicative of us as humans. We all, however we do something is right, right? It doesn't have to be the same as this person or that person. It's what we need to do for ourselves. And just following that really is the key, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm on a little bit of a mission. I'd see the thing about the sobriety world is it's a little bit like the martial arts world before MMA came along. Everybody is standing there telling you that their method is the best.
Yeah.
All of the karate guys are going, karate is the best way to fight.
Yes.
All of the boxers saying boxing is the best way to fight. And look, I get that. I get why people are passionate about the method that saved their life. I mean, why
Mhm.
would you not be passionate about that? But what we need to do is realize that there are strengths to karate and there are weaknesses to karate. There are strengths to boxing and there are weaknesses to boxing. And we need
Yeah.
to come together, preferably in a cage,
Put
and we need to work
it
out
all
what
in.
works. All pile in, slug it out. No, we need to work out what works so we can better serve the people that we are trying to help. We need
Yeah.
to take the strengths from the things that everybody's doing and understand the weaknesses, and then find a way to better help the people that we are here to serve. Because ultimately, we are all about the people that are in front of us. We aren't really about the systems that we use. We're about
Mm.
the people that we're trying to help. And, making that shift, that was so important for me, making that shift from being very dogmatic about a single system to understanding, the breadth of what is there. And, it is honestly, it is always this little bit of a tension. You've got to realize that you're not that different and that you are like everybody else, and you've got to do the kind of things that everybody does, but you've got to do them in your own way. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we talk about the sobriety equation, which is EQ plus RC minus T times C. Yeah, no,
Okay.
all right, I'll explain that. I'll explain that. So
Thank you,
it's
thank you.
emotional intelligence, which
Yeah.
is the EQ bit. Self-awareness and emotional regulation are a massive part of sobriety. Lots of different ways of doing that, but that is something you've got to do. RC is the recovery capital. So that's job, family, home, car, the nitty gritty of life, diet as well, you can chuck in there.
Yeah.
And you've got to get that recovery capital bit right. That is going to be absolutely different for everybody.
Yes.
You live somewhere different to where I live, not just time zone
Yeah.
wise, but you've got a different configuration of living
Yeah.
arrangements.
Yeah.
And that's right. So we've all got to find our own way in that, but we've all got to build that recovery capital, because that is the stuff that keeps you sober. Minus T is you've got to learn to manage the triggers. You're never going to get rid of the triggers, but you do need to do that piece around thought management, around the associations that you've made, the people and places and events that will make you think, oh, I think having a drink would be a great idea.
Yes.
Bang,
Yeah. I
let's do
love
it.
that.
So that's that trigger management bit. And then times C is connection, because connection it's one of the things that comes up all of the time. In fact, I'm running an event talking about connection this evening. And the thing about connection is everybody jumps to connection with other people, and that is important. Connecting with other people, we're a social species.
Yes.
Loneliness kills, so it is important. But actually realizing that connection, it goes the whole way through everything else. Connecting with yourself is so incredibly important. Connecting with your meaning, with your purpose. Those are the kind of things that actually help you to connect with other people. Connecting with spirituality, if that's your thing. So we like to look at connection in a deeper, rounded way. But those are the things: emotional intelligence, recovery capital, trigger management, and connection. Those are the things that everybody does. You don't have to do them the way I do them. You don't have to start skating, but
Yeah.
those are the things that everybody has to do.
Yeah. And maybe someone tells good jokes instead of bad jokes. I don't know.
I do believe there are successful professional comedians out there who've got some
Oh,
decent jokes.
that's some decent ones, but they don't get the
Yeah.
same reaction, do they, than the bad jokes? The whole, oh, it's just gold, isn't it? Like I love it when I suppose I can't call them dad jokes because I'm a mum, but mum jokes even, or parent jokes. I love pulling those out and watch my kids roll their eyes, but it creates connection still, right?
Yeah. I've got a really good friend who wants to write a book, and I'm kind of helping him out a little bit. And I was listening to this book about 6 months ago. It was about whole food, plant-based living. And I said to him, you should read this, because it's got this great kind of like mixture of like authority, because it's written by a doctor, very scientific, very authoritative kind of thing. It's got this great mix of that and just really weak puns. And he is like king of the dad jokes. And I said to him, you should read it, because I think, that's where your style needs to go. It needs that authority, but it also needs to express those terrible puns, because he just does it, like he can't help it. It's just, they come out. So it needs to be a part of what he does. And then he read it and stopped eating animal products, and now his family hate me because he does all the cooking. They now no longer get cheese or meat anymore. So I'm not very popular in that household.
So put you on the spot. Have you got a joke you can share with us just to end us off? Now it has to be clean, because I have a clean record on all my podcasts. So what have you got for us?
For sure. In honor of my good friend John, who used to be chairman of the Magic Circle. So he was an entertainer, an illusionist. So in honor of him, how do you kill a circus?
How do you kill a circus?
Go for the juggler.
I never would have got that. That's great. I love it. Well, thank you very much for jumping on, Duncan. It's been great chatting with you, and I'm sure our listeners would have enjoyed it as well.
Oh, well, thank you. I have really enjoyed it, and keep up the octopus.
Thanks. Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe, and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in